Hey guys, Rachel from TheLawTog, and I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about wedding photography contracts and how this works for your business. I totally get it. I have so many options available. You hear all these different recommendations from all these people on the internet, your lawyer, your mama, whoever it is, and you totally get confused and overwhelmed and you just shut down and you close off wanting to even get protected. Well, I want you guys to just pause for a second, take a deep breath, because I am an active practicing lawyer. I also am a photographer as well, and I get you. I've got your back. As the head attorney here at TheLawTog, which is the legal resource for photographers, I preach and tell you guys all about prevention over cleanup on aisle 4. And that's the entire goal with having these documents in place, all these contracts. I want to clarify, when I say contracts, I'm talking about any legal documents that we're going to use. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about the legal client timeline. I want to walk you through a chronological timeline of the process you're going to use with your clients and the different legal documents that you need to have in play. On this page, you're going to see a couple of bundles. They are all tiered so they can fit to your budget, and also so they have different inclusions based on where you're at in your business. Some people just need to start with the bare essentials, the main stuff. We have that for you. We have it all the way up through this huge bundle that has everything that I feel is a really good starting place to get you guys protected. So where do you even begin when you're booking a couple for a wedding? You start with creating the relationship together. And that's what the wedding contract does. That's the first document that's really important. This creates the legal relationship. It sets expectations between the both of you. It lets each other know about the responsibilities and everything that you're going to have with each other. It also provides some structure to the relationship. It allows for the contract to be the no man and give you a little bit of a backbone if you may have clients that are trying to steamroll you or push you into doing things that you don't necessarily want to do. It also provides a legal foundation should there be issues of a contract you can point to, as well as legal miscellany. This is really important to have in your business. If you're thinking, well, I haven't had an issue, so I don't need all that, guys, you never have an issue until you have an issue. And as a practicing attorney for photographers, I see it all the time where people don't have this main contract that they could have spent a couple $100s for, and they end up spending thousands of dollars playing cleanup on aisle 4, and I don't like making my money that way, and I know you guys don't like investing your time in that as well. So the first document is the wedding contract. This is the main one that you absolutely need to have. Paired with that is what's called a model release. This is the client giving you, the photographer, permission to use their images in your marketing. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. All right, but these are my images, so what are they giving permission? They're giving permission under what's called privacy rights. These are publicity. Actually, it could be either or, which I'm going to explain here in a second. But it's these publicity rights claims that they may have against you if you use their images in marketing with their face and they haven't given you permission, and you may also owe them compensation if they haven't waived that right to it, which is what the model release here at TheLawTog does. So non-negotiable, you guys need to have that main wedding contract and the model release as well. If you have nothing else, which is what is in the basic bundle that we have here for you. Really important to have. Now consider, you may have some clients that don't want you to include the model release as part of the relationship. That is something you need to decide if you're going to have. Best practice is to have two separate documents, the contract and the model release separate, so that it's easy just to throw out the model release if a client wants privacy, right? Or if something should happen, best legal practice to have two separate documents, so if one is ever thrown out, the other is still intact. So in this timeline, we have already protected and created the relationship. We've already made it so that you can use these images in marketing and not have to provide any compensation to the clients that are in the images, right? Now we have to start thinking about what we are selling to the clients and how we can protect that. In this day and age, weddings are typically going to include digital files. This is where print releases come into play. Now, the word release is kind of a misnomer because you're not really giving away any rights. You're actually transferring a personal license, remember, because we are under personal portraiture here. We're under weddings that are not of commercial nature. So you're really extending, selling, whatever you want to call it, to your clients a personal print license. Now, this can be anything that you want to have in there. You have the copyrights of the images, hopefully, and you also have the rights to be able to demand or outline what your client can do with those images. How can they reproduce and how many times? How large can they print? What can they do it? Where can they do it at? You can control that all within this print release document. So that's document number 3 that is really kind of important for you to have if you are selling digital files. The next to consider is if you are going to sell products on top of stuff that's already included in the collections that your client has bought, whether that includes albums, canvases, prints, digital files. You need to consider what will happen if the clients come to buy more from you or if you do an in-person sales session. Typically, you're not necessarily going to know that they're going to want those items, because if you knew that, you would have included that and had them pre-buy it in the very first consultation when they signed that initial wedding contract. So what I'm referencing here is really if you may have an idea that they want something, but they're not ready to pay for it all, and they're not necessarily ready to be contracted to a certain product. When you sit down in that sales session, you want to consider a couple of things. You want to make sure that they identify that there's final sale language in all of the documents and invoices that they sign that day. We're not going to get into all the cooling off rules. You guys can check that out on TheLawTog.com. There's a whole bunch of articles for you. You can read about that. But what I'm really referencing here is what happens when they have a really big order that they want to then purchase from you in this timeline. Remember, we had the contract, we had the model release, then we had the wedding, and then we gave them the print release with the digital files, but now they're purchasing products. You might want to consider, and I don't recommend that you guys offer this off the top. I recommend this as more of an ace in the sleeve, but you may want to consider having payment plan contracts available, ready to go in case they do want to order a large amount. You want them to sign right then, and that will govern and regulate the installment contract is really what it is, an installment payment plan. So consider having those available with you as well. Another document you want to think about, and again, this is between you and the client, we have not brought any third players into this at all, is this whole idea of what if you then sell an album to them, right? There's a lot of stuff that goes into creation of an album. There's the spreads, how many images, how many revisions, who chooses the photos, what is the timeline. Some of this may be included in the initial contract, but when you get to the section after the wedding, when everything is done and they're ordering more, you want to regulate that portion of the relationship because you essentially kind of have a new relationship with them at that point. You've already satisfied it, hopefully, and fulfilled everything in that first contract. An album design contract will set the expectations and outline payment amounts, much like what we talked about in the beginning with the main wedding contract, but now it's just going to be focused on like album design. The reason I really strongly recommend that you guys focus on having such a sensitive feel and touch and white glove handling to this is that albums can be extremely expensive. They can be expensive cost for you and cost for the client, and you want to make sure that all of that does not end up souring the relationship. You want to outline it all and move forward with that. Now, we can go ahead and kind of stop there a little bit. Let me tell you this. One final thing that I really think is important, and we'll finish out the client timeline of the legal documents to have, would be a product delivery agreement. This is not a make or break, but this is something that's really good to have to ensure to cover your back a little bit. When you deliver the products to the client, you want them to ensure that they've inspected and they have received them. This is especially important if you're delivering high-cost goods such as canvases, albums, and digital files. You want them to attest and inspect and state that they have received everything. That way there's no coming back on you for that initial contract saying, hey, you didn't fulfill this. This document is essentially what I just said. I've looked at it, I, the client, have looked at it, I've inspected it, I'm happy, I'm good to go. Now, none of these documents may keep a client from complaining, but it's going to help provide you a little legal protection to ensure that you are padded, guarded just a little bit from any potential liability. Let's shift gears just a little bit, but one of the key things that you wedding photographers have in your business that helps you to shoot on the wedding day is probably a second shooter. This is a very sensitive part of being a wedding photographer, and a lot of people don't understand why. You're probably thinking, oh, it's because I have another person shooting, I gotta make sure I pay them, gotta make sure they show up. Sure, a second shooter contract can do all that for you, but even more important than that is making sure that you outline some other very specifics that your second shooter can and can't do. Or, here is the big ringer in this. Second shooters are typically not employees of your business. They are typically independent contractors. So by default, these individuals are not going to be shooting for you, and the images are not going to be automatically yours as the primary shooter. By default, independent contractors own all the creation of the intellectual property that they create in the course of that project. They have to have something in writing to transfer the intellectual propertyship of the images from them over to you, the primary. If they do not do this, they can keep you from selling it. You should not be selling them to the client. It cannot include in client delivery. If you do end up doing it, they can revoke it at any time or sue you for profits, and we don't want any of that to happen. Now, can be a little confusing, and there's a lot of variations. I'm not going to go any further than that. I just want you to keep that in mind. So you want to have the second shooter contract that we have here that regulates the relationship and creates the relationship between you and the second shooter, but think about taking a step further than that. If they're an independent contractor, making sure you have a physical outline in such like an intellectual property acknowledgement that any intellectual property they create under the project with you is going to be owned by you. Because we don't want you to end up not being able to sell to the client, fulfill the contract, or even be able to use those images in marketing, right? So that is the wedding legal client timeline. Lots of documents. You guys can still check it out on this page. There's explanations. If you have any questions at all, feel free to submit through the contact form, and myself or the team are more than happy to help you out.